Hello, all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and I think it is time to talk about dialogue systems in GameMaker again. So last time we spoke about this, I had written a basic system which allows the user to walk around and walk up to an NPC and hit the spacebar to talk to them, and we'll display some text at the bottom of the screen, which corresponds to the dialogue that the NPC has defined for them. And that's fine for simple games, things like jam games, game jam games, things like games that you want to finish quickly. If you are just starting out in game dev, I would recommend writing a system like this just to have something like that, some kind of experience like that under your belt. And today we're going to be delving into something a little more complicated. So this basic system here is great if you just want each NPC to have one or a couple of lines of dialogue that they can display to the user. And if you don't need any sort of complicated branching behavior, any sort of complicated interaction from the player, you could hammer out something like this in, what's this, like probably 30 lines of code total. But if you do need something like yes/no dialogue interactions, or if you need something like events to happen in the middle of an NPC speech, you can hack stuff like that into this sort of system, and people have. But the amount of code that you have to write to do such a thing tends to go up pretty quickly. People like to make fun of Undertale's like 5,000 or whatever line switch statement, which handles all the dialogue in the game, but it's really easy to end up with something like that if you just start with something like this and just keep like adding conditions and features onto it. And that's something that we generally like to avoid. So that brings us to the subject of today's video, which is going to be Chatterbox. Chatterbox, like several other things that I like to talk about on this channel, is the brainchild of Juju Adams. And it's basically a GameMaker implementation of what I guess we're going to call the Yarn narrative design language. I just call it Yarn because that's a mouthful. Yarn is a dialogue system which has been used for quite a few games over the years. Night in the Woods is probably the most famous. You may have seen these characters popping up on the internet, even if you're not familiar with the game. And Chatterbox is a system for ingesting files written for Yarn and making use of them in GameMaker. Or at least I should probably say that's how it originated. I believe in recent versions it started to diverge a little bit from the Yarn spec, but at this moment in time it's still basically Yarn with a couple of extra fancy features. Now, before I start, a word of caution. So Scribble and Input, the two major Juju Adams libraries that I've talked about on this channel in the past, after a little bit of initial setup, you can basically treat them like drop-in replacements for things like draw text or keyboard check or whatever. And after you spend a little bit of time configuring them, you basically get things like fancy text effects, etc. for free. And if you wanted to, there's not much of a reason not to use them in all of your GameMaker projects ever automatically. But that is not true for Chatterbox. So all Chatterbox is a system for ingesting Yarn files and turning them into a data structure that you can use and giving you an interface to access the data structure with. Chatterbox will not draw dialogue on the screen for you in any way, shape, or form. It will not automatically handle cutscenes for you. It'll just give you a set of tools for doing so that's easier than writing it from scratch on your own. And don't get me wrong, it will do a lot of things for you, but if you wanted to make use of a lot of the hallmark features of Yarn, like multiple choice dialogue options and that sort of thing, you're still going to have to take the time to implement that in your game yourself. And also, if you're using Chatterbox, you will have to use YarnScript to write your dialogue and cutscenes, and that all has to be done in tooling outside of GameMaker, and if you're writing a simple game, there's really no reason to have to complicate your workflow like this by adding external tools to the equation. You can sort of map the Chatterbox functions onto the dialogue system that we wrote in the last video, although I'll be rewriting large parts of it from scratch in this video. But because you can't just treat Chatterbox as a drop-in replacement for other systems the way that you can with Scribble and Input, I would not necessarily recommend that all of your GameMaker projects automatically use Chatterbox for dialogue. Again, if you really want to, I'm not going to like break down your door and stop you or anything, but if all your game needs is a system for displaying single or maybe small numbers of lines of text, like we had in the original demo project, just do that. It takes like 15 minutes to implement a system like that. And if that's all your game needs, then that's all your game needs. There's no reason to spend development time complicating the workflow with features that you're not going to use. So, did I download Chatterbox yet from the repository? I don't believe I did. I'm going to go to the Releases tab. Currently, as of my recording this, the most recent release is 3.0.1. We can go and download the YYNPS. Obviously, if in the future there are more recent versions, you should use that instead. I'm going to open this in Windows Explorer. It's going to open up on my other screen for some reason. I'm going to take the YYNPS and just drag it into GameMaker. I am not going to just import everything the way that I often would for other extensions. Actually, I'm going to just add the entire Chatterbox folder in this asset package because that's where the actual GML code is. But in the included files folder, I'm only going to add the Chatterbox license because everything else in here is like part of a sample project, which you don't really need. I'm actually not sure if including all this in the YYNPS was deliberate or if that was just a mistake, but we'll include the license because it's polite to do so. Apparently GameMaker thinks I've already got a copy of that because I was using this as my test project earlier. And we're just gonna add those things. And if you want to feel rebellious, you can open it up, look inside. System, don't look in here. Don't tell me what to do, Juju. OMG, I can't believe you looked in here. This is not all, but most of the Chatterbox internals. We're not interested in that right now. Alright, cool. So we've got the code in GameMaker. We've got the Chatterbox code in GameMaker. Now we actually need a file to use with it. And for that, I'm going to go back to the README of the repository, and there are some suggestions for things that you can use to write your yarn file dialog. There is the visual editor by faulty functions. You can look at this. Crochet is basically a fork of the original Yarn Classic project, and anyway, I'm going to use Crochet because mainly because I'm familiar with it and I don't know how it might or might not differ from the official Yarn Classic project in ways that I didn't expect. There is a Windows download that you can use, or Windows, Mac, or Linux, I guess, which you can use, or there is a if we go back to the root of the repository, there is also an online editor which you can use. I'm just going to use this because it's simple and I don't have to wait for anything to download. I'm sure people will have opinions on using online editors for things like this, but I don't really care. Use whatever you want. So Crochet is going to open up with something that looks like this, if you've never used it before. This is going to be based on nodes. I'm only going to work with one node today. In future videos, I'm probably going to go writing more complicated structures and dialogue trees and graphs and that sort of thing. But let's just open up this node. You can give it a title if you'd like. The first node, whatever you'd like. I'm just gonna, I think start is honestly as good as anything. And now we need to write some text. What text do I want to write that I want to appear in the game? All right. Let me think about this for a few minutes. Do I really want to use the generic hello world text? I kind of don't want to. Alright, for no particular reason, I just borrowed some text from the Constitution of the United States. This is from Article 2, Section 4. It pertains to impeaching the president and other various elected officials who don't behave themselves. And that's going to be our dialogue that we show in the game. So there are 2 lines here. You could obviously have as many lines in a node as you'd like. And they will be read out by the Chatterbox system in succession. Again, you can also have multiple nodes and you can have them connected in different ways, and you could have various branches and control structures if you'd like to, but I'm not going to I'm going to be keeping it simple in this video. For whatever reason, there isn't just a save option in the file menu. I have no idea why we're making that design choice, but if you want to actually save the file, you can say yarn file. You can export the yarn file. And that is going to just dump a file called newfile.yarn in my downloads folder. I feel like I should have gotten the opportunity to name it. I know that you do on the desktop version, but instead, let's go back to my GameMaker project. I'm going to open up the project in Windows Explorer, and I'm going to toss that yarn file in the data files folder, which will make it available as an included file. And let's rename this to dialogexample.yarn. Okay. So now that we've got the included file, that's the yarn dialog file that we're going to use in this example project. We're going to need to write 2 lines of code to actually make that available to GameMaker through Chatterbox. One of them is going to be Chatterbox load from file. And that's a function which is going to take the name of the file that we want to load, in my case, dialogexample.yarn. And also, we can optionally give it the alias name, an alias name, which is going to be a name that we can use to reference this particular Chatterbox file, this particular yarn file from elsewhere in GameMaker. You could give this a name like, I don't know, example if you just like a shorter name or something like that. You don't have to. If you don't give it an alias, it's just going to use the file name as the default, like the name that you would use to reference it. By the way, because GameMaker is just like this sometimes, you see all these yellow and red squiggles underneath these? Yeah, you can ignore this. This is Feather not knowing what to do with these two functions when it honestly probably should. I have no idea why it has a problem with these, because it didn't used to, and one day it just randomly broke. Thanks, Feather. Really cool when you do stuff like this. Anyway, the next thing we're going to need to do is call a function which is going to be Chatterbox create, and this is actually going to be the analog to things like ds list create or ds map create or array create, that kind of thing. This is actually going to create the data structure for Chatterbox, which we can use to access later. Hey. It's going to take first the file name that you've already loaded, like this. Or if you loaded it with an alias, it's going to take the alias name. And there's also a couple of other arguments, optional arguments, that you can give it for singleton text and local scope, which I'm not going to get into those today. They subtly change the behavior of how Chatterbox works. In future videos, I'm sure I'm going to talk about them. And this is going to create a reference to a Chatterbox data structure object, which I'm just going to call Chatterbox as a variable name. And now that I started writing, the squiggles disappeared under this one and reappeared under this one. I have no idea what Feather was smoking this morning when it decided that this was the correct way to, check for syntax errors. But anyway, that's how we're going to create ourselves a Chatterbox data structure. By the way, I realize that this looks a little bit redundant to say Chatterbox load from file with the file name and then to say Chatterbox create from the same file name. But if there was ever a situation where you want to like create multiple Chatterboxes from a single file, then you could create different instances, different Chatterbox instances from a single file after it's been loaded. The expensive part of this operation is actually loading the file, which is this function. And then if you wanted to like create Chatterboxes from it later, then you don't want to have to load the file again because you've already done that, and that's a waste of time. You could also not do that. You could just like load a file, load the Chatterbox file, and then do this and treat it like a global data structure, which is usually what I end up doing out of laziness. Anyhow, there we have it. So if I run this, nothing's going to happen because we're not actually doing anything with this text, and in fact I commented out the code that makes things happen when you walk up to an NPC, so we're actually doing less than what we were doing before. So next we're going to actually need to like have this respond in some way. So let's see. If you're familiar with audio play controls on things like a CD player or more recently on like a digital music player, things like stop, pause, continue, those sorts of play controls, you might notice some analogs in the terminology that Chatterbox uses to control Chatterboxes, to control dialogue when it's being used. We have functions like Chatterbox is stopped. We have functions like Chatterbox is waiting. Things like Chatterbox continue. So is stopped you can obviously think of as an analog to like audio stopping an audio file, like canceling playback entirely. Chatterbox waiting you can think of as like a pause control, in that an audio file can stop playback where it is, but it won't rewind to the beginning. Chatterbox continue is obviously going to be continuing a paused file. And with this in mind, we can say if Chatterbox is stopped, and we're going to pass the Chatterbox that we created in the create event to that function as an argument. So if the Chatterbox is not currently playing, then we can say Chatterbox jump. And this is going to take two arguments. So that one is going to be the Chatterbox that we want to look at. Chatterbox is not going to sound like a word by the time I'm done with this video. And the other argument is going to be the node, the name of the node that we want to start from, which in my case is just going to be start. Again, this Chatterbox jump function has an optional argument for the file name. Not important today, maybe in a future video. And this is going to start the playback of a particular Chatterbox node. So if the Chatterbox is not stopped when you hit the spacebar, that usually means you would want to continue the text as we're doing down here, show the next line or that kind of thing. So I can say else if Chatterbox is waiting, which again is shorthand for pause in our audio metaphor. So if there's still text, if there are still lines that have not yet been displayed, we can use the Chatterbox continue function to display the next line. And again, Feather doesn't like basically all of these functions for reasons best understood only to it. This GM2039 warning has been like a persistent problem that has been fixed and regressed multiple times over Feather's, what, now 3-year lifespan? And I don't know why it keeps breaking, and it's really annoying. And I wish it would just stop. This is what the code is supposed to look like. Anyway, one more thing before I proceed. So, if you reach the last line in a Chatterbox node or in some sequence of dialogue, in my case that'll just be the second line here, and if you say Chatterbox continue from there, it will stop on its own. It will handle all that for you, and like you don't have to stop and rewind the Chatterbox manually on your own or anything like that. So that's kind of where the audio metaphor falls apart a little bit, but we don't have to write any special code to handle like the last line of dialogue or anything like that, like we might have to do if we did this ourselves. Anyway, so I'm going to, when it comes to actually getting the line of dialogue, because nothing that we've done here is actually going to get dialogue and display it to the user, we're going to need a little function which is going to be Chatterbox get content. And this is actually going to fetch the line of dialogue which the Chatterbox is currently like playing, again in air quotes. So we can say if, in this case, not Chatterbox is stopped. So, like if there is text to be read out at all, we can say Chatterbox get content. The first argument is going to be Chatterbox, and the second argument is going to be content index. I'm going to hardcode that to 0 for now. You could do some additional things with like putting multiple lines in a single Chatterbox. Again, not now, probably in a future video. And this is just going to return a string. And I can say var text equals that, or in my case, since I do want to at least try a little bit to map the Chatterbox functions onto the text system that I drew before, we can say current text equals that. And that's going to be our line of current text that we draw on the screen. And if we want to be extra fancy, we can say current text index also equals 0 so that it scrolls out typewriter-wise using the string copy function. Okay, let's see. So I guess it kind of wasn't 100% the truth when I said that you won't have to do anything when it comes to stopping a Chatterbox. You won't have to do anything to like tell the data structure itself to rewind, but in this case, the way that I've got this text set up here, I am going to want to say else, like if the Chatterbox is not currently playing, I'm just going to want to say current text equals like an empty string or something like that. Because the dialogue, like the text on the screen itself is not going to be reset in any way when you reach the end of the Chatterbox. And then let me go into the jar GUI event. I'm going to comment out the if currently talking is not equal to no one thing right now, because I'll get back to that at the end of the video, but for now let's just say if current text is not equal to an empty string, because we are just going to have the player hit the spacebar and have text appear, regardless of whether or not we're actually in front of an NPC. And because I'm surprised I didn't do this last time, but the second line that we're going to be reading out here is kind of long, and I'd be surprised if it all fits on one line before it overflows like the space on the screen. So let's use draw text extended to make it wrap. Separation can be -1, which is just like the line height default, and the width can be, I'm just going to make that window get width -64, and that should make it wrap nicely. So let's try this now. If I hit the spacebar, white rectangle appears. Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. All right, so that sounds important. Maybe we should do that once in a while. If I hit the spacebar again, it'll disappear because the Chatterbox is stopped and there is no more text. If I were to hit the spacebar again, I guess I could show that too. But if I were to hit the spacebar again, it'll just restart from the beginning. Perfect. That feels like a, should I commit a change there? This is going to be a big commit because we've added like all the Chatterbox files. Let's do that. So now, what I suspect most of you actually want to do with this is attach this to various NPCs. So right now, all the NPCs in this game, under obj_walkie, they have a, I guess it's not a variable definition, but a variable in their creation event defined, which is going to contain all the text in the game. And I'm going to get rid of that. I don't really need that. I'm going to define my text not inside the, like, I'm not going to hard code strings into the GameMaker project, but I am going to define it all inside a yarn file. And to do that, I'm just going to set up a little variable definition, and I'm just going to call this node name. And this can be a string, and we can set the default string to, like, start or something so that everyone's got, like, the default starting node. And we can set that to other things in, like, a variable definition in the room editor if we like. If I go into the room editor, all three of these NPC guys are going to have some creation code set, which, no, you apparently don't. Was it just these guys, these two? The ones that don't say the default text? I guess it is. Let's just delete your creation code text because we don't need that anymore. And we can set, oh, you know what? Start doesn't need to be in quotes because when it's a string variable definition type, it's automatically interpreted as a string. We can, like, give these guys other nodes if we want them to say different things. What should you say? All right, I'll come back to that in a minute. First, let's see. So in the player step event, previously, we're doing this if currently talking equals no one thing. We're going to check for someone who's in front of you, and we're going to, like, set their text to the game's current text. Instead of doing that, or rather, I should say, in addition to doing that, let me move all that code inside the Chatterbox is stopped function if block, and instead of instead of saying current text equals who is here dot text index 0 or whatever, I'm just going to say Chatterbox jump, and we're going to start a node in this Chatterbox based on who is here dot node name. That's what I called it, right? Node name. And we're going to start the node in the Chatterbox file that is specified by the NPC's variable definition, and that's going to allow different NPCs to say different things. I shouldn't need to change anything else. I guess if we want to, we could also save like the currently talking value here, but I'm not going to use it for anything. That's not what I meant to copy and paste. Currently talking equals whoever is here, like that. Obviously, this would be important if you want some sort of interaction with the NPC, like if you want like the NPC who you're talking to like show an emote over their head or something like that. You probably want to be able to save a reference to the NPC in that case. But in this example, in this video, I'm not going to do that. I guess we could also set this to no one when we run out of text like this, and also if we want to do this, you know, the way that we were doing it before, we could say currently talking is not equal to no one instead of checking if the current text string is an empty string. Anyway, this should work the same way as it did before, except the only difference now is it's not going to happen whenever I hit the spacebar, but only if I walk up to an NPC and talk to them. All right, Mr. Civically aware dog wizard guy. Let's go back to Crochet, and let's start let's define a few different nodes. What should you say? So it turns out most of the rest of the US Constitution is actually pretty long, and I don't feel like trying to stuff that much dialogue into this example. So instead I just went and borrowed some Schoolhouse Rock. We're going to call this Bill, and let's go and, what is that, 10 lines? All right. Let's go and export that. That is going to, again, save a file called newfile.yarn to my downloads folder. I'm actually starting to regret using the web editor for this a little bit because it doesn't, like, let me name the file or choose where to save it or anything like that. Let's go replace this inside the GameMaker data files. If you, like, were using the desktop Yarn editor, you could obviously just like open it up and, you know, give it a name when you save it. But that's going to be dialog example.yarn. We can go into room 1 over here. Let me give this guy another variable definition. That's going to be Bill. And we can walk up to you and have you start talking. All right, so you're the first NPC, default text. The other NPC down here also has the default text, and you are the one, I believe, who will start singing Schoolhouse Rock at me. All right, very nice. Works for as many lines as are defined in the node that we're running. If you, again, if you were to do more complicated things with this, you could also have like different nodes linked together in different ways, like under certain conditions. If the player has a certain number of like currency or whatever, you could jump to a new node. But that's going to be falling under the heading of more advanced use of Chatterbox that I'm going to talk about later. For now, I'm going to end this off here. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this, look for the link to the GitHub repository down in the description of the video. I will also have links to Chatterbox itself and to Crochet the editor. I will be making more videos on this. There's a lot you can do with Chatterbox. I even use it for things like scripting the stage directions in Wizardux, like having NPCs walk around during cutscenes, which apparently is something that people are surprised that I use Chatterbox for. I'll talk about that at a future date. Speaking of which, you should all go check out Wizardux and the Lost Hat, which is one of the games that I like to work on when I'm not doing YouTube stuff. Link to the Steam page can be found down below. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Squarecrow, Spy Games, Manta Ray, Ganymede Ghosts, GameMaker, Edward Holt, and DJ Gibbles for supporting these videos. If you'd like to join their ranks, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.